Hey, it's Paul Banas, thegreatdad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to dads of all shapes and sizes. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about divorce, which we've talked about before in the past, but this one is going to be a little bit different, maybe focused to a different listener. And we're talking about children of divorce, adults who are children of divorced parents. So welcome Kent Darcie, who's really an expert on this in this field. And I'm really fascinated to talk with you. So welcome, Kent.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here, Paul.
Yeah, so I actually am a child of divorce, like a lot of people of
hmm
our generation. I was an early child of divorce. When I was a kid in elementary school,
hmm
I remember one day kids surrounding me in the playground and saying, "Oh my God, your parents are divorced. Oh my God, what's that like?" Like I was really an odd person. And if I'd known then what I know now, I would have said,
hmm
"Well, you're all going to be part of half of you are going to be part of that club in about 10 years." So, so I'm fascinated by this subject. What led you to get interested in this area?
Well, Paul, basically, I was in the wave of divorces. My parents divorced when I was in
Okay.
72. So I was 12, 13 when my parents divorced. And for the most part, I was like most people. Eh, holidays are a hassle, going back and forth. I know a number of people had a rough time with their dads or didn't have a good relationship. I had a fantastic relationship with my dad. So I went from seeing him all the time, virtually every day, to seeing him 3, 4 times a year. So that was really tough. Lived with my mom and my 2 sisters. And basically, if you had asked me, "Are there any problems, Ken?" I'd say, holidays are a hassle, but not much else. A couple of anger issues, but I had other things to blame on that. But about 30 years later, I was actually at a marriage retreat, and I was confronted with the issue that if I didn't get my act together, I was on the same emotional path as my dad. And my dad at that point was heading towards his 3rd marriage. He was an adult child of divorce from an adult child of divorce from an adult child of divorce, which is very
Right.
common.
Wow.
And that scared me to death because I love my wife and I didn't want that to happen. So I'm a researcher by heart and I did a lot of research, interviews, and at the time just felt the need to convey this information out there. And my first seminar was in 2004.
Yeah.
And basically to convey what I had learned about a couple of the key things that I had learned. The first thing was that my parents' divorce was still affecting me, which if you had asked me, I would have said, nope, no big deal, kind of a hassle. And the second thing I learned at that time was that there were millions of me out there,
Hmm.
yet nobody was talking about this. So it had
Yeah.
a radical impact. And that basically started, the organization that I have today.
Yes. So, wow. So there's so much in there that you brought up for me, starting with the fact that you were 12. Quite often, from my experience talking to a lot of fathers and friends and seeing
Mhm.
kids grow up, adolescence is really a difficult time to have a divorce. Has that been your experience? I mean, it doesn't sound like it was in your case, but I hear from a lot of people that the kids who are younger or older weren't as affected as by divorce as kids who were in adolescence. And maybe that's more true of girls.
Well, with girls, and we'll get into it in a few moments, you have father hunger issues with girls. It really raises its ugly head in adolescence. But I would still say adolescence is the toughest. I mean, I was 12, 13, and I had anger issues almost from the get-go, which again is one of those issues we'll talk about in a few moments. But it's not great at any time, but the adolescent part, and particularly for guys, when we're just moving into puberty, we just are trying to figure out what is maleness,
Right.
to have the father gone. Now, back then, the women pretty much had custody. Today,
Right. Right.
it's at best 50-50, but
A little
at
bit different.
best 50% of the time, your dad's not there.
Yeah.
And that's really at best. Still, the numbers are not great on father involvement after divorce.
Yeah. And then also the fact that your father moved away. My father also moved away shortly
Okay.
after the divorce too. So I was same situation as you. I saw him maybe if I were lucky 2, 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And that was a real loss for me.
hmm
And that effect reverberates almost more than the divorce. I mean, if he had died, it would have been probably the same effect on me. I missed out because I was so young on the domestic fights and all the things that
Yeah.
some people really that is very traumatic. But what I lost is him being there as a father. So wow, I just imagine that this manifests itself in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's quite often people who are children of divorce. And I wanted to ask you that is that do you see a bifurcation of people having gone through divorce, like it sounds like you are very much like me. I having been through a divorce, a child of divorce, and being in a marriage that has its ups and downs, like we
Mhm.
all do.
Yeah.
I did not want to ever have that for my family. I did everything I could. I avoided that word like the plague. I would
Mhm.
never bring it up. I would never
Yeah.
threaten it. I would
Yeah.
never suggest anything like that could happen to me. Now I know a lot of people are different. That I have friends who are already on, third and fourth
Yeah.
marriages, and they
Yeah.
clearly didn't have that warning signal. So do you see that bifurcation in people's feelings about it?
You see both. And here would be a good time to talk about some of the issues
Hmm.
that affect adults with divorced parents. The first biggest one is anger.
Hmm.
We have ongoing unresolved anger that we drag through our childhood. Now, there's a second part of this that I'll touch on real quick. We've talked about children of divorce. The biggest area of divorce right now is gray divorce, which is
Right.
when
Yeah.
parents wait until they're grown to divorce. So we'll
Right.
get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm
and some of the
fascinated.
issues overlap, but as far as children of divorce are concerned, anger is a big one. We have anger because of what I call the loyalty challenge. Who do you love more, me or dad?
Mhm.
Whether it's spoken or whether it's not, you're always choosing to be with somebody, and that just causes a lot of anger in the kids. And we also have loss. There's a lot of loss. We can lose whole sides of the family. We could lose friends because we're moving. We may not be able to do sports anymore. There's all this stuff, and there's no place to go with it.
Oh,
And one thing I didn't say that's really important is the stand of my organization is we don't throw stones at parents. This is not about beating up
good. Good.
divorced people. This is
Right.
not about ragging on divorced people. Elizabeth Markhart wrote a book called Between Two Worlds, and she has a great quote. She says, "This is not about bashing our parents or knocking people who are divorced. This is about trying to prevent another generation from blindly walking down the path of divorce
Right.
and not knowing why." And to your point earlier, saying, do you find that people are like you and I was like, and I was exactly the same way. I said, you know what? There was days that I was like, because
Right.
all that. But I said, I will never do that to my kids.
Right.
I'll be miserable for the rest of my life, but I will, which is like, right. And we just celebrated 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, and it's the best it's ever been. But
Right.
I was committed, no way. But because of these issues, anger, which is a big one. The second big issue with adult children of divorce is fears. We have fear of abandonment,
Yeah.
fear of conflict, fear of doom, fear of inadequacy, fear of marriage. And
Mm.
fear, particularly in men, often will trigger anger.
Right.
Fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection. We get angry. That's just how guys tend to respond. Another big issue with adult children of divorce is trust. We don't trust anybody. The two people we trusted most on the planet turned out to be, we feel, not trustworthy. So we don't trust. And on top of that, we tend to poke people. Can we trust them? So we poke them with a stick, poke them with a stick, poke them with a stick, poke them with a stick. And eventually the person says, I'm tired of being poked with a stick and I'm out of here. And I say, see, I knew I couldn't trust them.
Right.
Okay. You have the issue of father hunger. And we talked about this a little bit. With father hunger, the question is, as a male, do I measure up? Do I
Mhm.
have what it takes to be a male? With females, it's two questions. Am I beautiful? And am I special? And
Right.
not beautiful like supermodel beauty, but beautiful in the eyes of our dads. So talking to dads is really important that
Right.
we are making sure they know they are beautiful and they are special in your eyes. But the first three or four things I mentioned are the big ones because anybody that does marriage, communication and strengthening marriage and all that knows that anger, fear, and trust are the things you need in a marriage. And guess what? With adult children and divorce, we are unaware that we are weak because we're anger. We have all sorts of fears running on and we have mistrust. And what happens is that feeds this cycle of dysfunction. And that is why when I do a workshop or seminar for adults, half the audience is divorced already and don't know why.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of this stuff kind of lies dormant and then
Mhm.
shows up later, and people are kind of unaware, like you said, like you feel like you're completely normal, divorce, no big deal. But then is it like the first crisis that hits the marriage, or how does that, is there a typical evolution of when the divorce starts to really have the prior divorce has an effect on the current marriage?
Well, it's interesting when a lot of times it's in college when people start to realize that things aren't quite right because they'll see other relationships, they'll see parents on move-in day and everybody's smiling and you've
Mm.
got
Yeah.
maybe one of your parents there. If they're both there, they're kind of on opposite ends of the dorm, they're kind of whatever, and you have that tension that your roommate doesn't have, and you start to see things a little bit normal or abnormal. But what'll happen is most of this is just flat out under the radar. We are not I went 30 years. And yeah, I mean, I'd be the first to tell you I had anger issues, and I blamed everything. I mean, the world and my boss and whatever and all that, never connected the dots. And basically what I do is help people connect the dots that, you know what? I am afraid of being rejected. Man, when she came home late from work, I was like off the charts and I had no idea why. But in reality, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection is running amok. And another interesting thing of the fears is the fear of doom. The fear of doom is kind of interesting. When you have somebody that from an intact family and the job's going good, marriage is good, kids are behaving, get a raise, everything's good, your anxiety level goes down.
Right.
If you've got divorced parents and the job's going good, the marriage is good, and the kids are doing okay, and you get a raise, your anxiety level goes up because you're expecting everything to crash and burn.
Right. Right.
And it's kind of under the radar. You don't realize that you've got this crash and burn sort of mentality, so we don't enjoy life. And,
Wow.
to your point earlier, my parents hid. I remember one argument, one. They pretty much kept it under wraps, and good parents keep it under wraps. But what
Right.
happens is it blindsides us all
Oh,
the more when it
right.
does happen. Because, like, where did that come from? And you
Right.
end up with this fear of doom that life can go south or sideways at any time, at any moment.
That's really interesting that you say that the people who kind of hide it, they're actually maybe doing a disservice to their kids because I think in my marriage, not to get too deep into it, but
Well,
we have our typical ups and downs,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
guess my fear is always that when the kids see you fighting, they're going to think, oh, that is going to trigger
right.
insecurity. But I think I've developed like a lot of people, the idea that they need to see you go into the depths and come back
Mhm,
to have that trust that just because there's a disagreement, even if it is quite
mhm,
heated, that still the love in the house is the most important thing and that the security is still there. But if you hide it continuously, and then suddenly one day it's just like mommy and daddy are no longer going to be
right,
together,
yeah.
that must come as a huge betrayal.
Oh, absolutely. And it also creates an axiom that, again, is running under the radar and most people don't know it's there. And that is conflict equals divorce.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if you're from an intact family, I mean, it's a fight, it's whatever. I mean, it happens. But if you're, and you said, when in the marriage does that, show up? When does this stuff show up? When conflict kicks in.
Yeah.
Because as soon as there's conflict, that program kicks in. Warning, this is conflict. This is bad. And then the fear of abandonment kicks in, fear of rejection kicks in. I mean, all this stuff kicks in. Reality, the programming that's running is conflict equals divorce because that's what we saw.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you feel like the most important thing, like the first step here, is really just bringing this issue, like it's almost like you have a virus living inside your body, and it's
Yes.
like learning that it's there, and then being proactive about it. Is that like the first step that children of divorced parents need to take as adults?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was in denial for 30 years, and most of the people I run across are in denial until they hear me talk. And then either the person next to them, their spouse, or a girlfriend is, kind of nudging them with their elbow, or, they hear this and they go, wait a minute. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, because we know the holidays are a hassle. We
Yeah.
know we miss,
Oh,
we're heading into this is August. I wrote an article some years ago called I Hate Christmas
right.
because we have people that hate Christmas, not because of the busyness. That's what we blame the busyness and it's too commercial and all sorts of jazz. But in reality, you can always tell a person who has divorced parents at Christmas
Yeah.
because you just go, so what you doing for Christmas? And if they go, they have divorced parents because now they're thinking, okay, well, I have to go over here, then I have to go over here, and then I have to whatever. And again, my dad, who I love dearly, I mean, he passed a couple of years ago, but he remarried twice. And you're talking, he was married to my mom almost 25 years. He was married to my first stepmom almost 25 years. And he was married to my second stepmom almost 25 years till he passed. So they all overlapped. So it was, when you have relationships that there's more girlfriends and there's more whatever and all this sort of stuff, when you get to Christmas, it's a nightmare. And we know that, but we don't realize that we are terrified that our wife or girlfriend are going to leave us. That programming is running. And if we are confronted with it, we just blame it on whatever because we love our parents. In most cases, like I said at the beginning, this is not about bashing divorced parents. I love my parents more after I dealt with all this stuff than I did initially, because I said, you know what? And I've also learned that divorce is horrible and, there's reasons and all that sort of stuff. But we don't want to hurt our parents. And as guys, we don't want to have emotion. So we're just not going to go there. And unfortunately, it's going to rear its ugly head. It just is.
So when you say some guys are like they're fearful of abandonment in that
Mhm.
way, is that like the other side of the coin of the guy who runs around and cheats on his wife because he's afraid of the abandonment, so he's going to abandon first, or he's trying to create a safety net
You
because of
know,
that same fear?
that's textbook women. It I and most of the research that falls on the women's side, but I wouldn't be surprised because that's textbook. When you have a fear of abandonment,
Right.
I'm a licensed counselor, and I literally just heard that this week. I mean, that they would rather, and it's kind of interesting when the relationship starts to get good, they'll break it off because they would rather break off the relationship than be abandoned, which sounds like what? But if I hadn't, seen it in so much research and heard it so many times, I wouldn't even believe it. But yes, exactly what you said is true. Now, the other issue we have, with men and women, but when we're talking men, is addictions and porn and basically trying to salve that pain. You know, running around with a lot of women. But again, sometimes that women thing is the father hunger thing. Am I a man? Do I have what it takes? And unfortunately, in our world today, how it takes is, how many women can you have? And are, Joe Macho and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
And we get caught up in that when in reality, we are looking to just be loved and respected and know that we measure up. And that's why it's so important to be aware that these issues are maybe running under the surface so that we can identify them, deal with them, and then walk really in health and not in fear.
Yeah. But so getting back to the holidays thing, especially since this probably will be released in September, it will be kind of like on that
Yeah.
glide path into the holidays,
Uh-huh.
which do trigger a lot of people. In
Uh-huh.
my own experience, and maybe I'd be interested in if I'm an outlier, but I've almost overcompensated. For me, holidays are sacrosanct for the family. I do everything to really dig into all the family part of the holidays. I'm very strict on making sure there are all the dinners, all the celebrations,
Mhm.
without fail, big dinners and everything, as well as many family dinners we can have even during the week. Is that like a small percentage? I mean, would you say most people are more triggered by the holidays, or do they see that as an opportunity for the family to get together and reinforce the family structure?
I don't know that it's either or.
Yeah.
I think you can have both.
Yeah.
The thing is, you were sharing that, I was intrigued with that because, like, for me, I worked in retail for a lot of years, and you'd have, well, back then it was Muzak. I don't know what it is today, but, but around, a week or so before Thanksgiving. I mean, now it's July 4th, but back then it was maybe around middle of November, you'd start hearing Christmas music.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as I heard the Christmas music, I'd start to get depressed.
Oh,
It would
yeah.
be this sadness that I could never quite put my finger on.
Mm.
But I also was big on Christmas, making sure my kids had a fantastic Christmas. Guess what? I made every game I could possibly be at. I was at all the plays. I
Yeah.
was at all the whatever. And that's very
Yeah.
common. And you know what? That in itself is not a bad thing. The problem is that it's for the wrong reasons.
Mm.
It's because we didn't have it, and where that comes into conflict is, what if our spouse isn't as whatever? What if we really should is it okay to miss a game when this other thing really needs to happen? And that's when this programming goes, "You can't because you need to be there because they need to know you love them because they need to whatever." And in reality, if you miss a game, it's not the end of the world, but that program that's running underneath is driving the show. Or if your wife or girlfriend, she's not as big on Christmas. Why do we have to have 2 turkeys and a ham and a thing and a whatever and a thing and 2 trees and whatever? I
Right.
think just 1 tree and whatever. And you're like, "But we've gotta have this is the way it's gonna be." And nobody asks why.
Right.
And then we connect the dots and go, "You know what? I've got my family. I have a loving family. I have Christmas, and maybe we don't need 2 trees and a thing and a whatever and all this sort of stuff. We can have the tree, have all that without going over the top." We tend to overreact or
Yeah.
overcompensate in a lot of situations. So yeah, that would be true.
Yeah. Well,
But it can
I'm
be
I'm
both sadness and overcompensating.
I'm totally guilty of that. I mean, I quit my corporate job to stay at home with the kids, and
Yeah.
then I started this website for greatdad.com
Yeah.
with the idea of promoting involved fatherhoods. And I
Yeah.
like you're saying, I felt guilty every time I missed a game, though I went to,
Hmm.
99% of them. All those
Hmm.
things you say are true. And
Yeah.
talking to the other, back when I started this, there weren't that many dad bloggers. I don't know if
Yeah.
I haven't interviewed as many now as I did then, but
Yeah.
back then, all the guys who were doing any kind of dad sites or anything, they all came from divorced families. They all grew
Yeah.
up without a dad present, and they were
Hmm.
all trying to compensate for something that they felt was lacking. Now, for me, I was totally aware of that. I wasn't like, this isn't like a big aha, thankfully,
Yeah.
but I can imagine for a lot of people that they wouldn't know why they're compelled to do certain things or feel
Yeah.
so bad or find that as a source of conflict when their partner doesn't see it exactly the same way.
Right. We don't, my whole calling, if you will, my whole organization is built on connecting the dots. I mean, a lot of what I say isn't really brain surgery. I mean, it's not, neuroscience or aerospace engineering or anything. It's just we connect the dots. And the key though, is once we have this information, now what do we do? Because we can either be like I did. Well, I didn't have the information, but I was in denial for years. I mean, if you'd said, "Oh, whatever, I'm good," when I was not. I mean, fear was driving my fear of abandonment, fear of
Right.
conflict was running the show,
Mhm.
fear of inadequacy. I mean, with fathers, one of the issues that we deal with is that we don't hang with kids. We don't babysit as a rule. I mean, center of the bell curve. I
We
mean,
don't grow up with that in our past.
right,
Yeah.
where the ladies
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
So guess what? You get married, you have kids, and you didn't have a dad. So you
Yeah.
didn't have that mother
Yeah.
father image, if you
Yeah.
will, for a
You
lot
don't
of
have
your
anything to model.
childhood. And you're going in with a blank slate. And in a lot of cases, your wife, assuming she's not from a divorced family as well, probably babysat the nieces, used to play with the kids at the family picnic, did all this sort of stuff. She's got kids and is wired to nurture anyway.
Right.
Doesn't get why you're so, because you don't. And if she says something critical, what happens? Fear of inadequacy kicks in. We get angry. She gets upset. We get angrier, more scared. We get more angry. She gets more upset because you're always overreacting, which is true. And and next thing you know, the conflict, warning, divorce, and you get that weird cycle. And because of these issues, like I said, half the people I deal with when we do a workshop or whatever, they're divorced already because the very things that strengthen marriages are the weaknesses of adults with divorced parents.
I can so see that because already in our culture for a long period, and it is getting better, but there's always been a little bit of the patronizing toward the dad. Oh, isn't it cute that he's changing the diaper,
Right.
or the outright criticism? Oh, you don't know how to do this. And if you
Right.
came from a divorced family and you didn't have a dad growing up, that might trigger even more feelings of
Right.
inadequacy. So when you talk to partners, wives who didn't go through divorce, I mean, I can tell you my wife and her parents were worried about her marrying somebody who had divorce in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Do you have advice or do you deal with that type of thing too, where the partner has to be aware that they're not necessarily walking into a minefield, but that there could be things that need to be worked out before?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And really everything that we've talked about, they need to be aware of. Sometimes when I run across a spouse that, is dealing with somebody that has divorced parents, the first 10 podcasts on our website are kind of an overview of the issues that affect adults with divorced parents. And they're only 10 or 15 minutes long. And I'll say, listen to those, see what's going on. And a lot of times they'll go, you know what? Yeah, I saw that. Yes, I saw that. Yes, I saw that. And it's really important for them to be aware that these are going on. The big thing I tell, the people from intact families is never threaten divorce,
Thank you.
not even as a joke. Because for us, it's not a joke. I
Right.
mean, not even, it's not, it is not even in the ballpark of a joke.
Right.
Don't threaten separation. Don't say, I should have married whoever, even as a joke because we're basically insecure,
Yeah.
be very careful. And if you are upset, it is very important to say, you know what? I'm mad right now and I'm upset, but I love you and I'm not going anywhere. And you can never say that too much, because until we start to deal, first we have to identify what the issues are. Then we have to process through those issues so that they aren't triggering us all the time. And then we kind of come out the other side to where we can live a reasonably normal, quote unquote, life. But as you're going through that process, the spouse, and it goes either way, they really need to know what is going on in the mind of that person, because a lot of it is fear. And when you realize where they're coming from, then you're less likely to overreact, because you go, okay, you know what? Fear of abandonment. I came home late. I should have called, and I forgot to call because I was in a meeting, and they're like, wow, over the top that I'm leaving them. So you just come in and you reassure, reassure.
And that's where all these things, from small problems all the way up to large, can become far greater if the person isn't aware of how they trigger that person, the child of divorced parents, in a way that maybe they wouldn't have really understood. I mean, it's
Yeah,
one
it's on
thing to
both
have
sides. Yeah, it's on both
one
sides.
thing to have a disagreement. It's another thing
Yeah.
for that to trigger a response of the trauma of divorce,
Yeah.
whatever that trauma was.
Right. And there's also great marriage stuff out there. I mean, yeah, we're going to have disagreements and whatever, that's going to happen, but you can learn how to process them differently. Back in the day, I mean, there just wasn't that much
Right,
marriage
you're right.
stuff out there. And now there's just an unbelievable amount of marriage support stuff out there on how to communicate, how to, convey those concerns that you have or whatever, that wasn't available back then. So you can strengthen the marriage. And that's the thing that I really encourage people: don't bail. Because still the research shows most of the divorces have nothing to do with abuse or any of those outlying issues. Most of it is, I mean, even affairs, that dropped to number two, man, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago, at least. The number one issue for divorce now, I'm just not getting my needs met.
So, well, that's another interesting angle, because my take on this, or my feeling about this, is I always say the same thing. Maybe you're getting at, is that unless there is abuse, that almost everything else can be worked out if you
Yeah,
believe in the sanctity of marriage. And
yeah,
we'll talk maybe a bit at the end, but you're also a minister, and I'm not religious myself, but what I do believe in, that the reason why you have
right.
that ceremony is to get up in front of a bunch of people and take a vow in front of them that you're in this for the long haul, and for better or worse and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
But that group behind you should be part of the covenant, that they should be
Yeah,
there supporting you to stay married. You made this vow. I saw it, you were in it, and you knew there were going to be, bad days and good days. Stay with it. Stay with it.
yeah. Well, and I'm not a minister, but but the key thing is to get a driver's license. I mean, I don't know what state you're in, but here in Michigan, you've got to do phase one, phase two, go to
Right.
these classes, do all this sort of stuff, take a test at the driver's license place, and then take a drive with the guy or gal, and do all this sort of stuff. And if you did get through all that stuff, then they hand you a driver's license. Marriage license, you go down to the justice of the peace, you say, I do, boom, you're done.
Right.
And we don't have any tools. We don't, I teach, when I have couples come into my counseling office, the first thing I teach them is empathetic listening, which we're not going to get into here, but basically it's listening to understand instead of
Right.
listening to judge or defend,
Right.
because we all listen to judge and defend, and we need to listen to understand with just some basic marriage tools, just some basic, we're trying to be equal and all this sort of stuff these days, but there's some basic gender differences.
Yeah.
Guys tend to be logistical. Ladies tend to be relational. I mean, that's just how we're wired.
Right.
If
Right.
you understand some basic gender differences and some basic tools of marriage, you can make it through an awful lot of stuff. But without those tools, it becomes malicious instead of ignorant. Instead of they just don't
Mm,
know, it's they're purposely doing. She is disrespecting me. Nobody talks to me like she does. And she is purposely disrespecting me. And I don't deserve this disrespect. Nobody deserves this disrespect. All my guy friends say I don't deserve this disrespect. But it's not malice. She
yeah.
just
Doesn't.
doesn't know. And once we can get past the malice part of it and have those tools, it'll be a lot easier to stay together and process through those bumps that, like you said, are going to come.
Well, that's good advice for a lot of human interactions these days. Well,
Yeah.
so switching a little bit from the male child of divorce, the male adult child of
Yeah.
divorce, what about men who came from an intact family and are
Mhm.
married to a woman from a divorced family? Where are the minefields there? What are the things that men should be aware of?
Okay. Same things. Anger, fears, they're all there.
Yeah.
But trust, she doesn't trust. But the big one with the ladies is father hunger.
Mm,
because father hunger, there's a couple things that are problematic with that. And again, I mentioned the big questions are, am I beautiful? And again, not supermodel beauty, just beautiful in the eyes
attractive.
of her dad, and ideally you. And am I special? And in the context of childhood divorce, special enough to stay here, because some of the research actually shows that the girls, because they're relational, they take the divorce harder and they tend to take it egocentrically. That the dad wasn't leaving the mom, the dad was leaving them because they
Yeah.
weren't beautiful enough, they weren't smart enough, they weren't whatever enough. Now, the problem with that is if they don't get those answers from a constructive source, they're going to get the answers. And there's a whole lot of guys out there. They'll say, oh, yeah, you're beautiful. And oh, yeah, you're special to me if. And there's strings that usually comes to. So by the time she gets to you, she may never have had a safe environment to be in. So it's really important that you understand how sensitive she is to anger, how fearful she is that she isn't worthy of who you are, no matter how she comes across, and that you take the skills and learn how to communicate and learn how to do that. So when she's fearful, she can be absolutely assured that she is beautiful in your eyes, that she's special, all the stuff I said earlier. You're not going anywhere. I'm upset right now. I had a rough day and I wasn't
Mm,
expecting this and I'm
yeah.
upset, but I love you and I'm not going anywhere. And that you will always treat her with the love and cherish that you promised. Well, I love and cherish that you will always be that way, that you're not going anywhere. She needs that reassurance. And you have to tell her every day that you love her and that you would marry her all over again every day, that she's beautiful. I used to, my wife came from an intact family, but there was some alcohol and stuff in the background. So we never should have made it statistically. I mean, you know, but they need to know every day that you would pick them all over again, that they're special, that they're beautiful, and I told our daughter all the time, I have two boys and a girl. And I would always say, you know what, you're beautiful, just like your mom.
Mm,
Man, you're creative, man, just like your mom. You are so special. Oh, you're so amazing. Just like your mom. I would always be pumping up my wife, that my kids know that my wife is the queen, if you will. I mean, that I love her. And particularly the last 10 or 15 years, I've been really, big on that because I was not a great person for the first probably 25 years, 25, almost 30. It was because of the anger and fears. I was not a great person. And I'm very thankful that I, was open to receive this information because I'm a researcher by heart. I did a lot of, interviews and stuff and learned this information so that I could come to a place where I was healed or healing. I'm still on the journey, but healing and could treat my wife the way she deserves. So that's
right.
a long answer to a short question.
No, but I think it's a really brilliant answer, and I hope people find inspiration for that. That you can start that at any time, and that that's part of your role as a father is
Yes.
building, especially building up a young woman to feel that
Mm.
kind of confidence as they develop
Even if you're
relationships.
divorced, and if you're divorced, it's even more important.
Mm,
The rules that I say when I run across, people who are divorced or divorcing is you never say anything negative about your wife, period, in front of the kids, ever, with an earshot, whatever. You never put them down, ever. And the second thing is you never put your kids in the middle. And it's really important because a lot of times there's all that anger and whatever and all this sort of stuff, but the kids, it's not their fault. And when you denigrate your wife, you are denigrating your daughter.
yeah, half of them. Yeah,
You've got to understand that, yeah, shouldn't, you were treated wrong and all that. I don't mean that. I mean, I do only this for 20 years. And when I deal with adults with divorced parents, guess what? I also hear the divorced parent side too. So I get the pain and all that. I'm not minimizing that. I'm simply saying we have to rise up and have a standard that we will never say anything negative about that woman. I don't care how horrible she is, because guess what? Your daughter's not your wife or your
yeah,
ex. And
yeah.
she needs to know that women are not bad because that's one of the problems that dads have when you're raised with women. When we're raised, a lot of times I hear, all guys are the same or you're just like your dad, which used to be a compliment. Now it's a dig. We're in a society right now that's really anti-male,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we have to be very careful that we don't do the same thing to the women. So as the dads, if you're divorced, it's really important that she knows that she is special. Do your daddy date nights. And I mean, I don't care if she's 6, start young. If she's 26, start now,
Right.
but do your daddy date nights. I would encourage you also, since they're a child of divorce, and particularly if they're older, the book that I wrote, Choose a Better Path, is a great overview of what they experienced what they're going through, and it really helps them to helps you to understand what's going on in their hearts. So make sure that you're all the stuff that you didn't get, you're doing. Because guess what? They are now out there, and there are guys out there that are going to tell them that they're special and they are beautiful for all the reasons that we fear because we were guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother area. I don't know if that's usually related to the young girls who are attracted to the kind of predator type guys, is that's often related to that type of need for a father
Yeah.
figure.
Yeah. The guys can smell weakness. It's really interesting. In fact, it's one of the things we teach women is that unhealthy women, healthy guys are repelled by unhealthy women.
Yeah.
And the wrong guys are attracted to the weak women. So we have to be really careful. But again, as guys, we have tremendous power to reinforce with our words. And if we're dealing with anger and fears ourselves, we want to deal with that first. It's kind of like on the plane. If the oxygen mask come down, you put your oxygen mask on first. So I encourage, if you got divorced parents or you know somebody's divorced or whatever, find out what's going on, acknowledge what's going on, process through what's going on, and that way you can be that healthy person your daughter or wife or whoever need.
Yeah.
Or sister for that matter.
Well, Kent, this has really been a really interesting conversation, especially since I personally understand a lot of the issues that you're talking about in and out of the different situations we've talked about. You have a website at hopeforadp.com. So hope for adult of
Divorced parents.
.com. So hope for the number 4 adp.com. And then you have the book Path to
Choose a Better Path, overcoming the impact of your parents' divorce. And there's
find that.
also on the website, I like to say it's not the Kent Darcie show. I find the best resources out there to help people. Like with Gray Divorce, there's a great book called Home Will Never Be the Same Again. If your parents divorced after you were grown, there are issues. Learn about them. And Home Will Never Be the Same Again is a really great book. That's on the website. So basically, I find the best stuff. And on the resource page, you'll find a whole variety of resources. The podcasts are mine, the videos are mine, the blogs are mine. But, all right, well, and I interview other people, but the resources are whatever's out there that can help.
Yeah, it sounds like, just in general, it sounds like this is like a lot of issues, is being aware and being sensitive to them, doing some self-examination of yourself, whether you are the child of divorced parents or you are partnered with somebody from divorced family. That's the key first step.
And if you're down the road, you're a parent and you've got adult kids who, or maybe you're estranged or whatever. The Choose a Better Path book is not a big book you have to read because guys aren't big. And it's also available as an audiobook and an ebook because guys don't read, as a group. But you want to make sure it's an overview of the issue. So it's not these big, got to read. It's actually full of narratives, little short 2-page narratives that walks you through the basic issues that are probably impacting you. Or if you're an adult and your kids experience your divorce, it'll give you an insight into what they experienced.
Wow, that sounds really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kent, thank you so much for spending time with us. Yeah. So hopeforadp.com. Yeah. Check Kent's work out. I really endorse any kind of, deep dive into this for a better understanding, whether you're the child of divorce or whether you're involved with somebody who is from a divorced family. All right. Paul Banas with greatdad.com. You can find my coaching services at greatdad.com/go, and work that I'm doing right now on developing resilience and some free resources there as well. So until next time, stay strong. Take care.